Okay, let me ask you to start by asking you the most obvious thing. All right, we're rolling, Jim. Why? Why did you undertake to write an oral history of Howard County's black community?
The main reason is because it had never been done. There were all of these people here in this county, and yet there was not a record of them except their birth date and their death date, and perhaps a marriage date and a school record, but nothing about their personal lives, how they related to other people in the county, what they felt about being Americans in Maryland throughout their lives, what living was for them, how they used their church experience, their work experience, their community experience, how they combined all of that into being the people that they were. All these years they had been here putting their thoughts, their blood, their sweat into making Howard County home, not only for them, but for everyone who lived here. And yet there was no record of it. It was something that needed to be done.
What do you say to anybody who might say to you, gee, a history of Howard County and the blacks in Howard County? No famous people came out of Howard County. No famous blacks came out of Howard County. What's so special about Howard County's black history? What do you say to people that say that?
There are very few people who build bridges and institutions. Those are the ordinary people. And they have a history, not only their personal family history, but their history as it relates to just growing up and their personal lives. The history of blacks in Howard County is a part of the total history of Howard County. Just as there is no history of the white ordinary citizen in Howard County, and that still needs to be done, and until it is done, that history won't be completed. Just as the history of the elite is a part of Howard County, the history of the blacks in Howard County is a part of the total history of the county. It belongs here.
Why is it important to pass down a history to people, especially to young people? Why is history important?
History is important because it gives you roots. None of us is an isolated entity. We came from somewhere, and whatever that somewhere is, it has roots that are important to us. We need to know what our parents did, what our grandparents did, what they thought about, the problems that they came through. Many times we don't understand why our parents treat us the way we do, the way they do, unless we understand the trauma as well as the joy that they have experienced throughout their lifetime. History gives us roots, and that's important. Otherwise, we will just fall for anything, or we just will not consider any place home. I've heard people say that home is where you hang your hat. That may be true, but home is also where your roots are, what you think about as home when you are away from that spot. Okay? That's why it's important to pass on this history. What we were finding in the schools was that many of the black students could not identify with the rest of the history of Howard County. And until this book came out, it was as if Howard County was not a part of them, that they had no real reason for being here except that their parents were here. Now that this book has come out, they say, there have been people who look like me who have been a part of this community all of these years, and it makes them have a sense of belonging that they did not have before. And it's important that as we instill that into our children, they are then able to instill it into their children. Roots are important, they are vital. Nothing lives without roots.
What then is history? What is it? Is it important events? Is it everyday events? What is history? How do we define history?
History is everything that has happened. History is not just inventing something that the whole world is going to lay accolades on you for the rest of your life and after. History is something that has just happened that gives you momentum to move forward, because you build on what has already happened. History is not dead. History is alive, because when you look back at history, it isn't just the events that you're looking at. You're looking at the people who are involved. You are looking at their family, as we were talking about, their favorite color, who their favorite teacher was, their favorite meal, their favorite or unfavorite disciplinarian, all the good things, all the joyful things, whatever it is, that is a part of history and a part of those individuals that we look back upon as saying, that is my ideal. I would like to emulate that person. So you have to know what's back there in order to know what is in you that you want to be like that person, whoever it is. History is vital. History is something that if we don't talk about it, much of it will just disappear. The history itself is there, but the appreciation for the history will not be there. That's what we must pass on from generation to generation, the appreciation of that history.
All right, let me ask you then to just tell me briefly about the book as a project and why there were three authors and where the funding came from and why this was the right time to go about it and whatnot.
The timing was right because the funding was there, for one thing. It came about because of Maryland's celebration of its 350th anniversary and because of the money that each of the counties had to support such projects. And not only that, but it also involved different agencies in the communities working toward a specific project. And to our assistance came Howard Community College, who needed a project for the 350th anniversary. And they were very helpful in helping us with in-kind donations, the tapes, the typing, helping with the paper and with the printing, and then finally calling on the Vocational Tech Center to actually do the printing when the project got just to be too large for the facilities here at Howard Community College. But not only was it the community college, it was many of the county agencies that I went to for help, who were always willing to share whatever information they had. People would call me or see me at the store and say, Alice, will this help your project? Alice, is the project engraved in stone yet? I found another old picture that I want to share with you. Can you use it?
Now, what was the part that the NAACP had in this project?
The part that the NAACP had in the project is that I was a member and still am on the executive board of the NAACP, and I wanted the project done under the auspices of the NAACP. My involvement initially was because there was a committee here in Howard County, what we call our 350 committee, that was involved with coordinating events celebrating the 350th anniversary here in Howard County. And as a member of that committee, all right, I wanted the NAACP to also have a project that would last long after the 350th celebration was over. And it was because of my involvement there that I became aware that the money was available. And when working with others here at the community college and in the county, that it all came about. It was easier doing it under the auspices of the NAACP, perhaps, than doing it under myself, because my name, Alice Cornelison, was not known in the community, but the NAACP's name definitely was. I also wanted it done under the auspices of the NAACP to let people in the community know that the NAACP is more than just marches and boycotts and complaints. There is a positive aspect that we have, and that is in enriching the lives of all of those who become involved with the NAACP and in the communities where the NAACP happens to be, whether those citizens are black or white.
Mm-hmm. Now, how was it determined to sort of set up the book in three sections, and why those sections and why those people for those sections?
That was because the project got to be too massive for one author to handle. And in going around and doing oral interviews, it just seemed that the material just seemed to drift into three different components: the oral history section, the schooling section, and then the contemporary issues that were related to Columbia, the aspects of what was happening with blacks and their feelings when Columbia came into being, that happening, which was now been 20 years ago. And so I asked Silas Craft, who was very much involved with black education here in the county when he first came to the county around 1944. And I asked Lily Price, who got married during the project and is now Lily Price Wesley, all right, to write the section for contemporary issues, which she did by interviewing those Colombians who were here at that transition, those people who either had been here all their lives or who had moved into Columbia at the very beginning. And so they could tell the types of experiences that they had in this community, particularly with the whites in Howard County who weren't so sure how they were going to take these new blacks that were coming into Columbia.
I love the difference between the new blacks and the old blacks, sort of the pre-Columbia
The
blacks.
pre-Columbia blacks, that's right, and the new blacks. And over the years, any differences that has been there has just melded, and so we are all the black community of Howard County, which is a part of Howard County.
In fact, let me go off on that tangent, if I may, for a moment. Did you find that I guess most of the people that for contemporary issues Lily Price Wesley interviewed were they some of the new blacks, as it were, that she interviewed for that section, and that you pretty much interviewed the old school blacks from pre-Columbia blacks? I'm wondering if, in comparison of your notes, you found differences of opinion of how Columbia affected the total black community of Howard County. If the old blacks tended to sort of look at it from the corner of their eye, and the new blacks tended to find it a very optimistic thing for the county, or what? What did you find out?
There was a slight difference. Lily Price did interview one lifetime Howard Countian, and that was Dottie Moore. And so she was able to then bring from the richness of her past the combination of that with the newness of Columbia and share that transition, certainly from a different perspective than those individuals who had moved into Columbia when it first began. There was a difference in how people perceived Columbia. My part with the oral history took me to certain corners of Howard County, of course, outside of Columbia. Very few of my interviewing was actually done in Columbia itself, except for where a person had moved in from the outskirts of Howard County into Columbia. Many of the persons were suspicious of Columbia. They were suspicious of Jim Ross. They were suspicious of the whole movement. And this is because all of their lives they had lived in a segregated society. They were extremely suspicious of integration when it came, because they felt that their best black teachers would be sent to the best white schools, and that the worst white teachers would be sent to black schools. And so much of this did happen in the very beginning. And so it took a while for as we say, the blacks from the older parts of the county, people who had been here all of their lives, to really get to the level of trust that I believe they have now. And I think that's because of how Howard County and Columbia have evolved over the last few years, and in trying to make this a better community for everybody to live in. We all have a part. There's something each of us can put in to make this a better place to be.
That's for sure. Let me ask you this. More times than not, when you talk about any specific subject, and I've found this true too in the interviews that I've done, everyone seems to come back and relate it somehow, whatever the specific issue is, they relate it to education.
Mm-hmm.
It's an amazing constancy that you find that people come back to. Why is education perceived as being so important among the black community?
Education was important because it was a visible part of every community, just as every little community had its own visible church. All right. Education was important because all of us knew, all blacks knew, that you had to learn how to read and write just in order to deal with the white community. And in learning that, they found that their particular life was better. They were able to read books that perhaps their parents had not been able to read. And they were very much hopeful that in educating the newer generation, whatever that generation was, well, then their life would be better. Many times it was a way of getting those youngsters to escape Howard County and move to a higher level of education in Baltimore or in Prince George's County or in other areas of the state or the country. And that was because education did not go very far for blacks in Howard County years and years ago. There was no high school. This was long before Tubman for blacks. And also before the black high school at Cooksville. But yet the interest in education has always been there. Even if it was just to get the students to learn to read and to write and to learn something about history, about civil events, whatever it was, that has always been a very important. In the first place, it's hard to read a Bible if you can't read. And so many times the schoolhouse and the church were in the same building because they were so closely integrated. So I would say that education, as well as religion, has been a very important factor in the lives of blacks in Howard County.
That's right, I never realized that many times that in fact, most often, I guess, the school and the church were in the same building, or at least on the same grounds, or something like that. That's very true. I didn't realize that. Let me ask you a specific question with regard to Tubman. Tubman seemed to be so well liked. There's such a fond place in everyone's hearts for Tubman High School, and yet, as much as the black community campaigned for, I'm seeing a paradox here, is what I'm getting to. As much as the black community campaigned for integration, when it came about in 1964, it almost seems like there was kind of mixed feelings now. I mean, it's great that integration was achieved, but at the same time, it meant losing Tubman. What's your thoughts on there? Is that a paradox? Is that a sort of give up to get situation?
Though the black community did not want to lose Tubman as a high school, it would have been all right to integrate Tubman. They expected it to be integrated. But as it turned out, they lost Tubman totally. That has been very difficult for the blacks who fought for Tubman in the first place. Tubman was important to the entire black Howard County community because they worked so hard to get it. They fought hard to get that school. They were there and they watched every single brick being put into place for it. And so it was a very big part of their lives. First place, it was the social center for many activities beyond the hours of school. The parents' groups were very much involved in Tubman, as they were in many of the black elementary schools at that time. And Tubman was just a part of all of them. And so when Tubman was taken away from them, it was taking like a piece of their heart from them. They had fought hard for this school, and they were very proud of the school. They were proud of the graduates. They were proud of the quality of teachers that had come there over the years. And then to lose that completely was very painful for them. The administrators that were there were not given a lateral move at desegregation time, okay? They went into less positions. And this was traumatic also for the black community because to them, desegregation, integration, and there is a difference, meant that whatever they had, it was less than what they had at the time.
So the original expectation was that Tubman would be integrated.
Would be integrated. And the school board itself had planned to integrate Tubman, had even planned to build another school, all right. But Tubman was not to be anymore. There was just too many improvements that needed to be made, and it just did not seem a financial good situation at that time, the school board felt, to bring Tubman up to the standards of the other high schools that were in the district at that time. And so Tubman then has been used for administrative purposes, still for the Board of Education. So the building, even when people pass it, there is still some trauma there for them. They are still angry that the name Harriet Tubman was never put on the high school after all the years that it was there. And you see, here again, this is a part of history because you have to know how you were treated in the past in order to compare that to how you're treated now, okay? We cannot become to the point where we feel that everything is all right as it is now. We have to know what has happened in the past to make us alert to what is here now, whether it's overt or covert. You have to know part of your history.
Right. All right, let me shift gears a little bit here. Oh, I know what I wanted to ask. Did you, since we've sort of established that people were very eager to talk about education, that certainly is true. Did you find that there were any issues that people were reluctant to discuss?
When my tape recorder was on, they were reluctant to talk about the things that happened during the years of Prohibition. And this is because I understand that the people in Howard County made some good stuff during Prohibition time. And it was a time when the black and white community worked together very well. Blacks didn't have the stores that had all the sugar and whatnot, but many of the blacks had the know-how. And because some of those people who ran those stills were still alive, they really did not want that as a part of the book. But they would say, Alice, turn the tape off. Let's talk about this when the tape is off. And they were excited to share that part with me. And it was fun to them at that time to share just the whole process, because it was a business, and it was a profitable business here in Howard County. And they named names, blacks and whites, who were involved at that time. And they just, even now, they did not want that to be a part of the book. That is something that, and it was funny. The stories that they tell, many of them are funny, comical. They are quite amusing, and they enjoy talking about it, but only when the camera's not rolling or the tape is off. And that happened in several parts of the county, but mostly out near Brighton Dam Road, because that's where the water was. And so that was fun.
I found that too.
Did you?
Excuse me, guys, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
When she leans forward,
Yeah.
I'm losing her in the focus.
That's all right.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah, no,
then I'll try not to lean forward.
Okay, it's okay. Don't you worry.
All right, thank you.
That happens. That's great. Yeah, I found that too. I couldn't get, who was it I couldn't get to talk about that? Boy, I couldn't get Earl Levi to talk about it very much. And I couldn't get, oh no, who was it?
France, did you get that? Albert France?
Yes, Albert France. Yeah, I asked him about the stills. Oh yeah, there were stills all around here. Where were they? Well, they were over there somewhere.
That's right. Well, some of the people I talked to, as I said, actually they worked at the stills, and they would talk about their some of the close escapes that they had when the revenuers would come through. And they didn't want that in the book under their name, but they were happy to share it anyway.
Let's see. Where was I? I've really gotten off on the tangents here. It's great. Let's see where I am here. Covered a lot of stuff. Oh, I know. How did how was it determined who would be interviewed for the project?
The hardest part was getting started. We sent letters to the black churches all over Howard County, particularly those older churches before Columbia. And I asked them to interview their oldest member of the church who had been in Howard County all of his or her lives. I also asked them to really look into their own personal history of their church and to get it in writing if they had not done. So the letter had two purposes. The committee that we had in the very beginning through the NAACP got together, and we just pulled names together of persons we knew had been in the county all their lives who would have a story to tell. And so we started out making a list, and I started out interviewing. There was some reluctance at first, the first or second interviewer, until they found out how harmless I was and what the true purpose of the whole project was. And then the word spread around. And so it got to be, has Alice called you for an interview yet? Why hasn't she called you for an interview? She talked to me. And so it was easier to do after the first two or three. And I tried deliberately to get into all pockets of Howard County, because this was to be the black history of Howard County, not a specific area, not just Daisy, not just Dayton, not just North Laurel, not just Elkridge, but the whole county. Okay.
So I guess that almost answers my next question. It was going to be, what was the general reactions of people when they found out that you wanted to interview them?
It was very good, and I am still getting a lot of good reactions from people who have now had a chance to read the book and who have seen the slideshow that we put together of pictures that we had collected from people from the oral history interviews, and they have a good feeling about it. We always get a lot of requests during Black History Month, February month, and here again I say my favorite spiel that black students are black all year long, not just in February, and that black history should be incorporated into the entire school's history throughout the year, wherever it can come up, not just during February. The reception has been very good, not only of black citizens, but of white citizens. And then groups, there are various groups. And we're really delighted that now Harvard Library has called and asked for a copy of the book. And so we are excited about that. All of the historical societies in pretty much Maryland have asked for and received a book. There are certain other libraries who never lend their material, and they have copies of the book, so that it will be there forever and ever here in Maryland. And we're just pleased with how the whole project has been received, not only in Howard County, but through the state.
Gee, that's great. That's special. Let me ask you, okay, now that they've had a chance to see the project and they like what they see, what kind of reactions did you get from people when they found out initially that you wanted to interview them?
Most of them said, but I have nothing to say. All I can talk about is myself. And I would say, but you are so important. You are a part of the history of this county. And even though you feel that you were not famous, there are still many life events that you have had that people want to hear about. Of what value are the Foxfire series if the history of Howard County, the black history, does not have value? You know, we are all important. We all have a story to tell, and in pulling all of those stories together, that was the fun of it, in asking the same questions all over the county and then comparing the answers. Because I found that most of the answers were pretty much the same, that people had pretty much the same experiences, particularly with the midwives and the birthing process and how many days the mother had to stay in the home, and when the light could reach the child's eyes, and what was done with the just the parts of the birthing process, how it had to be put out in a hole in the field, you know, so many feet deep, and all of this. All of these stories were pretty much similar around the county, and that was good to see because it told me that all parts of the county were connected in one way or another, whether it was for word of mouth or however. Even the churches, there was some similarity there, because it meant that not only was the church there on Sunday morning, but the church was there on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday, and it was used for other things outside of actual church activities. These things have given roots to people in this county for years. The education, the schoolhouse itself, and that little church, didn't matter what size it was still a part of them as they were a part of it. So it goes back to roots, it goes back to history, which is still very much alive.
Tell me, have you tried, or did you even care to attempt to draw any conclusions of the collective black history of Howard County in relevance to the collective black history of other areas of the country, or of the black experience in the United States? How does the black history in Howard County compare to the blacks everywhere? Is it unique, or is it pretty similar, or any conclusions to be drawn from that kind of comparison?
I would have to be careful with that conclusion, because I know this history better than I do histories, of course, in other parts of the country, except for my own back in the Midwest and Indiana and whatnot. I would say that the blacks here are proud of being a part of Howard County. They are proud that their parents were here, and many of them, their grandparents and their great-grandparents were here. And no matter how tough times got, many of them chose to stay here and work out the problems. When they had no place to live, they still stayed here and did the best that they could. And many of them who have moved away have eventually come back here because this is home. So it must have something for them here. There must be some positive memories that they have that has helped them get over difficult areas of their lives in other places. This is home to them, and they feel comfortable in Howard County, not to the extent that they will accept anything, but to the extent that they can be selective in what they choose to instill within themselves from this county. Okay? They like Howard County. They like making Howard County a good place to live. And the parts of Howard County that they don't like, they are adamant about being a part of that change process. They are not willing to just let anything happen to them. They choose to be selective. And that's one good thing that I have found about the blacks in Howard County. They choose to be selective. They choose to be here. All right. When something goes wrong in the community, they choose to do something about it, rather than to say, oh, that's just one of those things that just happens and there's nothing we can do. They have worked together as a group. And I think many times in other areas of the country, you may find people aren't working together as a group. But you see, they were here in large enough numbers that they could work together as a group. Very seldom did you find an individual trying to get something done without a group behind him. Even Silas Craft, who was a very powerful individual, always had the groups of people behind him, which made it easier for him to get his job done.
Let me ask you about Silas Craft. Tell me about Silas Craft. What's his impression upon you? The more you've worked with him and found out opinions about him from other people that you've interviewed, what do you feel about Silas Craft?
I would have to go back to one of the statements that someone says when I interviewed her. And she says that Silas Craft is the same wherever you see him. He is not one way for this group of people and another way for another group of people. Whatever it is he is preaching, whether it's integration, whether it's to get this better house here, whether it's to get this road through, whatever he's doing, he is consistent in his push to get something done for other people. Silas is a people person, and he works unselfishly and untiringly in many parts of the community, through many organizations, to get those things done. Silas is an individual that we can just overwork, because he is so willing to say, yes, I'll do that, I'm tired, but it needs to be done, and it needs to be done this way. Silas is a person who knows how to get things done. So there are certain organizational skills that he has, here again, part of history, that he can pass on to those who are around him, and we can use those organizational skills to get other things done. Okay? Silas is a taskmaster. He likes to see things done a certain way. And yet he is willing to be a part of the group in order to get the final result to be whatever he wants it to be. Silas is a gentle person. Silas is a hard person, depending on what is needed at that particular time. Silas is always a fair person, whether it's to a group, and if you are unfair in any way, Silas will tell you. He's fair about that. He is sure of himself, and he is received very well in this entire community, blacks and whites, because Silas is consistently right. He is consistently right in the issues that he fights for. And he never stands alone. Silas always has a group of people to stand with him.
Yeah, it's true. He seems to... He's not just out there battling by himself. He helps you see the particular advantage of joining together on something and then organizes very well, seems to me.
He is. Silas is very good in getting other people involved in the system, and that's what he's constantly saying. Come on, let's go to this meeting. Come on. Why weren't you at that meeting? Let me tell you about it so that you can get to the next meeting. He shares what he has. He is a very sharing, giving individual.
Let me ask you about this. Jump back to saying that you admitted you're from the Midwest.
Yes, and proud of it.
Sure.
But let me tell you this. Let me share this with you. What I found in doing this history was that I had a cousin here in Howard County that I never knew anything about, except I knew his name, and I thought that he was in Baltimore, but he lived in Elkridge. His name was J.N. Fitzgerald, and he played a very heavy part in the early education when Silas came. In fact, Silas stayed at his house in Elkridge. And so it was exciting for me to find out that I had a link with a county that I knew absolutely nothing about. And it was very strange because when we first came to this county, my family, in 1975, I had a relative in Baltimore who says, well, Alice, there is this cousin that we have in Elkridge. Well, at the time, I didn't know Elkridge from any other part of the state, for that matter. And it never dawned on me until I was doing this study, and this name kept popping up, and I says, James Nelson Fitzgerald. I have a cousin named James Nelson Fitzgerald, and I'm going to share this with my cousin in Baltimore to see if they're the same. And it turned out they were the same, and all she could say was, I told you that a long time ago. But you see, until you need something, you don't really hear it. And so that was exciting for me to talk to people who knew him in 1944, as Silas did when he came here. And I would never have been able to have garnered that information from any place else in the world except by being here at the right time. So I do have roots in Howard County that I knew absolutely nothing about, and I am very proud of those roots.
That's amazing. Does he still live in Elkridge?
Oh, no, he died about 20 years ago, well, longer than that, longer than that. But he was a businessman in Baltimore. He was a part of 6 brothers who were all very well educated for blacks. They were physicians, pharmacists, morticians. None of them ever drove a car except one who was the physician. They had chauffeurs all their lives. So that they lived differently than many blacks at the time. And yet there have always been blacks who have lived like this. Here again, a part of history that we generally don't read about because nobody has written about. But I'm very pleased to be a part of James Nelson Fitzgerald here in Howard County.
Isn't that great? All right, let me rephrase my question.
All right.
Since I got an unexpected answer. Even though you're not native to the county,
all right.
Let's just say you're new to the county.
Yes, I
in
am.
a personal sense, having only moved here since 1975. How has your experience in writing the history of the county, how has that made you personally feel about the county now as your newfound home?
I am very comfortable living in Howard County. I feel at home here. I feel that if there is ever a time at a convention where Howard County needs a booth in order to encourage people to move here, their families or their companies, let me do that job because I am an enthusiastic supporter for Howard County. I love the county. I love the people here. I enjoy it that there is a certain element of courtesy here in Howard County that I don't find in many other areas. For instance, when I go to the shopping malls and someone opens a door, people still say thank you, and I still hear please, and I still hear ma'am, and coming from all parts of the county, blacks and whites, it's a place where you feel comfortable. And yet I still hear angry, derogatory statements. But my job as an historian is to look at the reason why that derogatory statement was made and look at that statement in the context of the whole affair and not just because a derogatory statement was made. I love Howard County. I love this county. I feel that it's a blessing that I have been allowed to come here. It's wonderful. And let me make a correction in history right now. I said I came here in 75. I have to rephrase that. I moved to Miami in 75. I came here in 1978. So this has been 10 years for me, 1988. And it's been a good 10 years for me here in Howard County. And I'd like to think that if I had not been here to get this oral history started, just get the whole history project started, I would like to think that someone else would have done it because the timing was right. I just happened to be there at the right time to do it. And I'm very thankful to those people who have been open, who have been receptive to this type of project. So I couldn't do it by myself coming in from the outside. And so I had to report what people told me. The funny thing is now is that I hear people say, well, my father should have been in that book, you know, or how come I wasn't included in that book? Or something you said in there wasn't quite right. I don't remember it that way, but I have to say, but that's the way the other person remembered it who told me. And the beauty of history is that it is never, ever complete. It would be certainly dull if it were complete, wouldn't it? But there is always something else there that can be reported on. That's the beauty of history. We never know it all.
That's for sure. Let me ask you about over the last century, since that's pretty much what most of the oral history has been able to that you've been able to find, people still living and whatnot. I can remember pretty much things over the past 100 years. In general, what have you found to be the state of race relations over that 100 years? Has it changed and ebbed and flowed over that 100 years? And what are the factors involved in making it either better or worse, or however the course of that flow has gone in race relations here in Canada?
Restate that question again. I think I'm missing something there that you want.
Oh, no, I'm not implying anything. I'm really not. It's just that certain elements of the county seem to have had poor race relationships, always, even still do.
Mm-hmm.
We know what we're talking about. Other people seem to have virtually been untouched by negative race relationships. They say, you know, we've lived in this community all our lives, and the blacks and whites have gotten along within this community pretty well. Maybe a couple instances where there was obvious segregation, separation, but for the most part, we all went to church together, we all had our babies together, we all did this and that. It seems that for the most part, because of the rural aspect of the county, most of the blacks seem to have had jobs all the time. It wasn't like going to the white man who had the job, asking for a job, being turned down because he was black. Everybody pretty much, even during the Depression, seemed to find work all right. So in general, just from whites being whites and blacks being blacks and understanding each other or not understanding each other and coming together, over the past 100 years, have things generally been good? Have they generally been bad? Have they been good in some areas and bad in other areas? And has any of that changed? And what factors have caused them to be so? Has it been the ruralness of the county that has affected it? Has it been the influx of Columbia that has affected anything? Has it been Klan activities that have affected anything? What are the factors that caused race relations to be whatever they were over the past 100 years here?
The ruralness of the county played a big part, as you say, in the economic stability of many black families, and that was because those black families worked as tenant farmers, or they worked in those homes of many of the whites, whether it was a summer home or whether it was a home around the whole year. I have had several of them say that the Depression never bothered them at all because they always had a place to live, and they had plenty of food because they were growing it for that farmer. And of course, they also had their little garden there as well. At the same time, there were certain stores that they could not go to. They could not try on clothing in many of the stores. They would have to go to Baltimore or go elsewhere or order from a catalog their clothing, so that there was a certain level where they could not transcend in order to be on an equal level with the white community. This was a heavily segregated county. It is still in Maryland, the most northern southern state in the United States. And yet many of the blacks and whites worked together simply because they had been intermarried or just across racial lines, or not even being married, but just a lot of intermingling of the races from the very beginning, so that each of them felt an allegiance to one another in one aspect or another. Even their surnames were the same, whether they were black or white. That was always a part of it. And maybe that's one of the other things that has also made them feel at home here. Still, there were certain things that they could not have, certain homes that they could not have, certain places where they could not live in back when. And there's so many things that you can do with building your own house. After a while, you want something that looks perhaps like the big mansion at the end of the road. You want something a little better than perhaps what you and your friends are able to put together. And that's where they were blocked. Those better homes they could not have, even though they had the money for it. They were not permitted to live in better homes. And this was around the 20s, the 30s, the 40s. It just was not possible. I would say at that time that race relations many times were good depending on the time of year, because in the wintertime in particular, when there was snow on the ground, there was no truck to come down to clear the roads. There were the horses with the log across them that would then go down the road and clear. Well, that was done by the farmer on that road and the people who helped him. And so you had black farmers, and you did have black farmers, and you had white farmers who would clear those roads and work together. And one family tells me that that was in a particular area of the county, that the farmers would get together and work together as a group, going from home to clear all the roads of snow, and that wherever you were for lunch, that's where you ate, regardless of whose farm it was, and wherever you were for supper, that's where you ate. That was because that was just the way it was done at that time. So families and people of the community tend to pull together when there is a need to work together. But as far as being on a social level, as far as being even on an economic level, blacks were never on the same economic level as whites in this community. Never. There were very few. I should not say never, and you should never say never, is that right? There's always one or two people who are just outstanding, but otherwise, for the general people, they were never on the same economic level. Okay.
Let me just check my tape one quick second, and I have one more question to ask you.
All right.
Looking good.
That's good. I'm glad. Are you a Dodger fan?
Am I what?
A Dodger fan?
Yes, I am.
Are you really? I'm not sure I'm giving you the answers that you're really after, Nigel.
Oh, yes, you are. Oh, yes, you are. Yeah, I had one last question. We got about 4 minutes left on the tape. Here's my question. Oh, with regard to slavery times, seemed to have a lot of trouble finding any kind, certainly documentation, for slavery times here in the county. And you mentioned something about, or wrote in the book something about people even that knew about it, being reluctant to talk about it. Why was that?
They were embarrassed and ashamed of their slave history. It was not something that they really wanted to share, many families, with their children. It was painful, and sometimes those things that hurt us the most are those things we don't care to talk about at that time. Many of them could not write, so they could not put those feelings on paper, perhaps to share with family members at another time. But talking about them was extremely painful to many people who had come through slavery. And that's one reason why we have lost a lot of that history, because many people simply did not want to talk about it. They would say, yes, I was a slave, and I do not care to talk about it. But they never said, I do not care to write about it. And I think that if they had more writing skills, or even could write, many of them, that we would have had a part of that history that is lost forever. Because many times we write our feelings in a way that we can't speak about it. Okay.
Yeah, that's true. Okay. That was all. Why do you say you don't think that you're giving me what I want? Why did you say that?
Well, sometimes I think I'm so wrapped up in the project that I'm just not sharing exactly what is needed at that particular time with you. And I don't know where all of this is going to be plugged in.
The main reason why I'm doing this right now with you is to get your perspective as sort of the ringleader of this whole thing, okay? Because I can go to the people, which I am doing, going to the people that you've already gone to, and I'm getting their stories. I don't need their stories. I don't even need so much your reflection of their stories. I need your story.
Yeah.
Right? Because people look at this and say, wow, here's all the history. Well, who was the person who brought all this together? I want to meet her too. And find out about her, not just her reflections on the story, but her as a person. And that's what I need. So I wanted to get a little of both here today from that. And that's what I got. I mean, I'm getting everybody's reflection on Silas Craft, so I wanted yours too. Okay? And but only you can tell me what it was like to actually do the project. The other people were the subject of the project. They can't tell me what it was like to be a part of the project. It's not appropriate for them to tell me what it's like to be a part of the project. What's appropriate for them is their particular story.
Yes.
Is their content. But you can tell me about the project, because I want people to watch this program and I want them to ask about the book. I want them to go get a copy of the book.
Well, it's been an absolute joy.
Call the NAACP.
Yes.
And say, hey, you've got people over there that are doing things. How can I be involved? Okay. I
That's
want
good.
that kind of connection to be made when they see the project, and to learn who the people are, who are doing it. People like yourself, people like Silas Craft, and the people in the community who are part of the families that have been here for such a long time. We're trying to make that identification being made. That's why you're on camera today, because you're one of those people. So you yourself is an interesting piece of content, as well as the project that you undertook and the content of the people who were in the project. You can give me all three of those perspectives, because you were witness to all of them.
Yeah.
The people that I'm interviewing elsewhere were just the content of the project, so that's what I'm looking for.
I see.
So you can give me more perspective, and that's what you gave me today.
That's good.
Finish up with a shot of the shoes.
Yeah, let's get those.
Get that out of the way. Don't you dare. Don't you dare. Look at that camera.
Right, let me go turn the tape off.